Hey, this is Illuminati and welcome to the video sponsored by Gamazon.com and the DBM-GDG Games Development Group on Discord using Discord Bot Maker. Basically what this video is going to consist of is talking in regards to the usage of variables. If you notice with the tutorial videos that do come with Discord Bot Maker, you notice that it briefly touches on the basis of usage of global variables, temp variables, and server variables. Now, I have been working on a couple of projects, and one of the projects I'm developing now is a game that I have been developing for the past 6 months. It's named Discord Drug Wars. You probably know the main aspect because it's been around for years, as far as I can remember, in all sorts of genres and platforms. So basically what this video is going to consist of, more than likely it's going to be turned into a series, because I would like to show you just how deep you can possibly go with developing games and using Discord Bot Maker as the platform to enhance your server communities. So before we begin with showing you what I have been working on, and we're gonna analyze this command and see how it works within your project and within multiple servers, as well as on your server, and how that data is stored and kept together without overwriting each time your bot restarts, or for some reason it gets installed, or I should say the command gets rerun once more, which would overwrite whatever server data was previously on there. And of course you don't want that to happen, as you want server data to remain with each of its own server. So basically, before we begin, I just want to kind of show an analogy here regarding variables. And I guess the quickest analogy that I can come up with is using a pizza. Now, if you notice, pizza would be considered a global variable. In order to have pizza, you need to have bread. In order for the pizza, you need to have sauce, you need to have toppings, you need to be able to bake it. All those could be considered global variables, things that you will constantly use, but not for a specific purpose. Now, what I mean by that is that, of course, if I was to order a pizza, or you was to order a pizza, you will want different toppings on it, or maybe you want thin crust, or you want Sicilian, or you want just a regular pie pizza. That would be what the server variables we use. The server variable will use, okay, I'm going to use the global variable pizza. I know pizza requires bread, sauce, and toppings. Now, for this particular person, or you may want to consider a server, I want Sicilian with pepperonis and anchovies. So those are my server variables. I'm using the global variable pizza to create my server variable, which is also a pizza, but I want to use the crust or the type to be Sicilian, and I want the toppings of that global variable on my server to be anchovies, and I want spicy sauce. So I know that I'm going to use the global variable of sauce, but in my server I'm going to use that global variable sauce, which would be spicy sauce, and that would be my server variable using the global variable. Now, the temp variable is just that. I'm temporarily gonna give it to this person, this Sicilian with spicy sauce, to this person if he has the money. He pays me the money, and voila, I'm done with it. I'm ready to take the next order. So basically, that's the best way I can describe the usage of global variables, server variables, and temp variables. Now, just to briefly recap on all this, global variables are things that you're going to always use, but doesn't necessarily going to be using the same toppings, or the same sauce, or the same bread, and so on. Now, my server variable it says, hey, I'm gonna use pizza. So now I have the framework of from my global variable, which is gonna be, I want Sicilian. It's gonna have spicy sauce, and it's gonna have anchovies as those toppings. So now I populated my global variables with actual, what I actually want based on what's available in my global variable, which is bread, sauce, and toppings. And then the temp variable just says, hey, I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna give this server variable to this person who ran my command within my bot. And if he has the money to buy this pizza using these toppings, then I'm gonna provide that data. I'm gonna give that data to that member or that user. So that basically, hopefully, that would explain the usage of global server and temp variables. And just to briefly touch on what the DBM tutorials state is that global variables are basically things that are variables that is always gonna run every time your bot gets turned on or gets restarted. Your server variables are things that I'm gonna store, but I'm gonna use it in this command, but I may not use it in the next command, but I also don't want to have to retype the same information or the same actions within my command. So I'm going to save and store those server data, such as, for instance, the server name, into a server variable, and the server variable is always going to remember, for this server, this is the server name, and if I want to display it, I'll display it in the temp variable, which just shows me what data that server variable is currently holding, or the value. So let's go ahead and move on. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to Discord Bot Maker. And as you can see, this is the game that I have been developing over the past 6 months. I slowly been working on it, as I'm the only one, and providing or doing all the work for this, and it's kind of intensive, but after a while, in a few months of working with variables, you kind of start seeing, okay, hey, this is when I'm supposed to use a global, this is when I'm supposed to use a server, and you'll start noticing that all of your data that you're starting to collect, or your bot has collected from being run on other servers, are more organized instead of just dumped into one file, which is normally the players.json file within your data folder in your bots projects folder. Now we'll touch through all that quickly, as we analyze this command. And as you can see here, this game command basically it's what the bot does on each new server, and will determine what values the server is gonna obtain. So as you can see here, if I go to the to my action, store server action here, and you would notice that I have a variable here, and I have a store server data, and the data name that I'm using is price is set. Now what I'm doing here is basically I'm creating a variable from the current server that the command is running on, and I'm going to use the data name or the variable name called price is set, and I'm going to default that value to no, because my bot has yet assigned or given any variables or set any prices that are required for my game here onto the server yet. So it's going to basically create, what I did here was create a variable switch, or as I like to call it, a var switch. And what that does is it's going to check later on in my action list, it's going to check to see if this equals no or yes. And if it equals yes, then it's going to bypass all the actions that it will set the prices onto that server. And if it says, if the check for it is no, then it's going to run my commands or my actions within my command. So if you notice here, I have a store server info, which is I'm collecting the server name, the server ID, the server icon, or that is the logo for the server, as well as the server member count. And I'm going to store those all as server variables because I wanted to apply to this server, which is current server, that the command is currently being run on. So moving on, if you see here, I have a check action, and what I'm doing here is that I'm checking to see if my price is set equals yes. And if it is true, it does equals yes, then it's gonna skip all these actions and then process every action after after action number 177. If false, if price is set equals no, which is what we set to default, then it's gonna continue these actions here. And now, basically, action number 9, what I'm doing here is that I'm checking to see if this file exists. And if it doesn't, then it's gonna skip the next 2 actions. And if it does exist, it's gonna skip these to the following 2 actions. And if it doesn't exist, it's gonna continue the actions. So basically what I'm doing is that I'm asking my bot to check if this file exists within my data's folder. And if you remember that when I switched over to the store the server ID, that's what I'm using here as a temp variable and as a server variable, I'm sorry. So if you notice, I stored and all those server info into a server variable, and then I'm asking it to see if this file exists. If this file doesn't exist, which is my server ID server.txt file, then continue to the next action. And if it did exist, then it'll skip these 2 actions because there's no need to create a second server ID dash server text file within your data folder. It'll just overwrite your whatever data was previously in there, which you don't want to do. So basically, if that file doesn't exist, it's going to create within my my bots projects folder, data's folder. It's going to create a directory called servers, and then I'm going to append or create the actual text file within that directory. And as you can see, the information that I want to save within that text file is the server ID, the server URL, the server member count. So let's hold on, it looks like that didn't show, but let me show you real quick. Let me go back to append, and if you notice here, this is what I was talking about. I'm appending the following data that's being inputted here into the server ID server text file within my data folder, servers folder. So if I was to scroll down here, I can show you what I was discussing just a few moments ago. Basically, what I'm saving into this text file is this current server name, the server ID and server URL, the member and the server member count for that particular server. So as you can see, and if you notice, I do comment a lot of my actions, and the reason why I do this is because, being that I can't work on it as frequently as I like, I would like to kind of remember, okay, what did these couple of actions do within my command? Because more than likely I'm gonna forget it with everything that goes on, just day to day, etc., work and whatnot. So your mind kind of forgets, the pattern or the pattern you were working with when you were last working on your bot project. So basically, moving on to this command, within this command, you can see here, these following actions stores the member variables and data. Now, what I'm doing here is that I'm collecting the information based on the user of your server that is running the command. So, for instance, I want to take a grab. I want to store the member server that the member is on. I want the member ID number, the member display number, the server variables. You can notice here, I'm storing the level, which is always at 0, and I'm storing it onto the server variable because I want to use it later on. Basically as a default template. If you notice here, I have a store member data command offer, the temp variable experience, and basically as you notice, temp variables are only used and discarded after the command is done. It doesn't store any information unless you tell it otherwise, and it doesn't really display any information unless you tell it otherwise. And that's the difference between a temp variable and a server variable. Server variable is always going to have a variable name and data associated with it, which a temp variable is going to be given a temporary name. It's going to be temporarily processed, and it's going to be temporarily output its value, and then it's gone forever unless you want to save that data onto your server as a server variable. So let's go ahead and move on. As you can see, I'm storing member data, and basically this is all the data that I want that each user will basically start off with. So basically, as you can see, moving on to this command, this action number 22 stores the player's default money default, which is at $200. And then, as you can see, action 24, I'm storing the prefix for this bot on that server. So basically, if I was to create a change prefix command within my bot, then this here will store whatever prefix I had assigned to it. And I'll show you that real quick, because I know OBS has a little issue with showing multiple windows within an app, so I got to switch it manually. But this is what I was discussing as far as the prefix. This is storing the prefix that the command is currently running on for that server into a server variable called game prefix. So later on, if I wanted to display what that prefix was in another command, then it's already stored in a server variable. I don't have to recreate that variable and within a new command so that I could just use that data that's already there. And I'll show you that, as we go deeper into this command within my bot. So basically here, what's going on is on action 25, I'm creating temporary random values that I'm going to assign to the play areas within my game. And I'm going to show you how all this kind of works within Discord and Discord bot maker. So basically, just to run it brief down, there are 5 playing areas within my game bot within Manhattan, and those are the 5 boroughs of Manhattan. And you have Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So basically is that what I'm doing here is that I'm temporarily generating random numbers that I'm going to assign to the server as their initial starting prices for the products in this game. And as you can see, it randomizes all the Coke products for my game within the 5 locations, as well as the weed prices within the 5 locations of my game. And as you can see on action 44, I'm actually assigning the random variables that I just generated onto the server. And as you can see, is that what I did here is that I'm assigning the price value of acid in Manhattan for this server or that I'm currently on, and I'm setting the value to the temporary variable random Manhattan acid price. And what that action looks like, if you notice here, if we go back to our asset group here, we have the temp variable random Manhattan asset price, and I'm generated a number between 80 and 400, and I'm storing it temporarily into this variable name. And if you go back to action 45, you can see that I'm actually assigning it by using a control global data. I'm actually assigning it a set value to that temporary random value that I generated above in my action or command. So if we go on, basically that's what my command does. It'll go through all these actions, being that that file or that server text file doesn't exist, and it would assign this information or do these calculations and assign it to the current server that this bot is being run on, and that text file or that server ID text file doesn't exist and price is set for that server equals no. Then it'll go through pretty much this whole sequence. Now, if you notice here, let's say that file does exist. What would basically happen is that it'll skip the 170 something actions, and you can see, actually, if we go back here, I want to show you this. This actually, from here on, this actually sets the server average prices and quantities for each server. So basically here is I'm assigning it the temporary random value to this particular server, and so on. Now I'm going to show you what all this looks like as we go into this video. I'm not going to keep it too long, so that way you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. But if you notice that if that file does exist, what it will do is it will actually show just the stats or whatever values were assigned to that particular server. So let's, the best way to show you, actually what I want to show you is what your data files look like within your project folder. So all the global folder or variables that my bot is going to create in a few moments is going to be assigned to the globals.json file within your data folder, and it'll be the same for your server folder and the players.json folders, anything that's stored into regarding a member. So if we were to go to Discord and start up this bot and run this command for the first time, I will show you basically what we kind of just briefly went through within this game start command that I created. So let's go head over to Discord. It looks like yeah guys are already there, but I'm not. And from here, what I'm gonna do is make sure that my bot is currently on. It's still not on, so we'll give it a few moments while it launches. And this bot is kind of large in size, so we'll take a few moments to load. But once it does, okay, looks like we are up and loaded. And what I'm gonna do is, me being the administrator and being that I'm running the bot for the first time on the server, supposedly, let me just clear this out so that way we have a clear view. And I'm gonna go ahead and start the game start command and see what is outputted, and I'll show you what that data looks like as far as the variables that we did. So basically, as you can see here, it basically checked to see if that text file, that ID server text file exists, and being that it didn't, it went through all the commands that I assigned it to, and basically assigned it its prices. It assigned the global prices for my products within this game, to each 5 location. It calculated the global prices for all the 5 locations within this local server. You can see that for this particular server, it gave it these values, which are all random. So the next time I run this on a new server, it'll be completely brand new values, so that no 2 servers have the same values assigned to it. And basically here it just shows me the server variables that were created and the values that are assigned to to my server, being that I run it for the first time. And as you can see here, this tells me the server that I'm currently on. It shows me the server icon. Being that none of this information exists yet because I haven't run any gaming commands, you can see that the default settings I have assigned to them is the value of no sales yet, which basically just says that there's no information yet at this point to display. And you can see the names that I assigned to each distributor within the playing field of my game bot, and the prices that were assigned to that each distribution center is currently assigned to. Now all this will randomly change as the game goes on, or during time periods as more people buy products from the distribution center and sell it to other members of the server or to non-playing characters within the server, which could be enabled using street mode command and so on. So basically, as you can see, the action and the command basically work. Now if we were to go over to our global variable, if I was to go into my globals.json file within my projects folder, I can see the information that was gathered regarding this particular server that the command was run on. So just bear with me while I load up that file, and we're gonna go to open up my globals folder. Let's see here. Notepad global. We're gonna go file, open, and go to data, and go to all files, and we're gonna select global. You can see that basically what my global JSON file basically does is would display the last output that my command has, or the last actions that were given to any server. So basically for my server, being that I just ran the command, you can see the variables that it was, the global variables that it will use for my server variables. And if I was to go ahead and open up the servers.json file, you can see that the information is basically identical, being that this is the first server that the bot has run on, and this is what the servers.json file will look like. So as you can see, if you remember, within my first couple of actions in my command, I set a prices set variable and I defaulted to no, and then I did a check on that variable. And if prices set equals no, then it's gonna go through all the actions from the start, and it's gonna assign those variables. And if you can notice, if you can see here, the assets price and man local, and if you notice our global variables, it is the same. So basically what I did is I used the global variables and created a copy of, hey, this is what I want this variable to be, and I want to use it on this server, and I'm gonna assign it the random value that I want to generate it. And basically for my server here, this first server, as you can notice by the server ID number, that server information will always be intact. And as you can see, this is all the information and the variables that the server or my game would need for this particular server. So every server that my bot gets installed on, it's gonna have the same exact variable names, but not so necessarily the same exact values for each variable name. So moving on, if you, for instance, let me show you something here. If we go to the project folder, you can notice that that file that I had checked to create is now listed within the service folder. And if I was to run the command game start, here, let's head over to Discord so I can show you this real quick. If I was to type in game start once more, being that that file exists, it's only going to show me the information that was already generated for my command. So if you notice that the Manhattan price for my server, which was assigned originally, is 162. It won't rerun the same actions again because this file already exists. The server ID file, and if we used to go here and I was to open up that file, let me go here and show you what that server file looks like. You can see the prices that were assigned to my server. So basically, if this stops or prevents your administrator or your bot from overriding or running the same command once, being the command already exists and is already assigned, there's no need to run the action again and just display the data for that particular server. So basically, that's how global and server variables kind of work. Global is like, hey, I'm gonna use this variable name constantly, but I'm still not sure what the value is gonna be. Your server variable is, hey, I got the variable name from global, but I'm gonna give this variable an actual value. And I want to save this value for this server so that I can use that information later on if I wanted to in another command or another action. And of course, your temp variable is basically anything that is just run once. Hey, okay, I want to see if the user has enough money. If he doesn't have money, I'm going to send a message, hey, you don't have enough money. That's what temp variables are used for. So if I was to, let's take a look here, see if we have that open. Let's go to server. Okay, and you can see here's the server text file that the bot created and has the information that it was assigned to. So if I run my bot on a different server, it would not have the same values for that particular server. It'll be randomized and a new text file will be created for that particular server. So basically, if I was to go back and open up the server folder or the server variables within my project folder, you can see that all my variables from global have been assigned, as well as server variables that I'm going to use later on and their value just for that particular server. And you'll notice that each server data would begin with their server ID. So basically, I kind of hope that this explains the server variables, the global variables, and the temp variables. Again, this was what we kind of discussed in our GDG live discussion on Saturday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where the first hour we have an open discussion on commands or how to do certain things within Discord Bot Maker, which is open to any member of the DBM-GDG community, as well as the final hour of the GDG live discussion is actually breaking down this game or project that I've been working on, as it has a lot of features and things that are really cool and in-depth that you can use within your own projects, whether it's for a game or moderation tools. It'll basically give you a brief or a really good breakdown of how things are broken down within your bot and how you can use it within global variables, server variables, and temp variables. So if you have any questions, feel free to join us on our Discord server. At the link is located right there at HTTPS and whatever that I just said. But basically, we look forward to seeing you in the group, and feel free to ask any questions. And again, this is perhaps going to be a series, so make sure to subscribe and like the video so that you can get updated with the additional videos that would be associated with this video as well as this bot. And if anyone wants to help along with the development of this project or have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to DM me once you join us on our server. So other than that, I hope this kind of explains global variables, server variables, and temp variables, and briefly how they can be used within your bot, and the server and the data that can get outputted from using those variables and organizing them so that you can use them or read them in raw within your projects. Again, this has been Illuminati Games. It's been my pleasure, and talk to you later.